What's going on, guys? Welcome to iRace's Garage. Today we're going to take this old, crusty, filthy, terrible sounding, awful playing Ibanez, and we're going to turn it into a guitar that looks good, sounds great, and plays like a high-end instrument. We're going to do it ourselves, and we're going to do it on a really tight budget. So let's go. Welcome back, guys. For those of you who are returning viewers, you know that usually this is an RC based channel where I work on RC cars with a DIY budget based approach. But I also do the same thing with guitars. I love to work on guitars, improve them just like I do with the RC cars, but I like to do it on a very practical budget, and that means a lot of DIY. What I like to do is get guitars like this one that might be at the point where they're not really a desirable guitar anymore. This guitar is a perfect example. It's filthy, it's got a poorly selected set of electronics, so it doesn't sound very good, and because of the heavy strings and a very poor setup, it plays terribly. So it's just not a guitar that somebody's going to want to use. But with a little bit of work and a very small amount of money, we can fix all of that. It's going to take a little bit of elbow grease to get this guy all cleaned up and to get it playing like a high-end instrument. But we're also going to replace these pickups with something that I think is going to be a huge, huge improvement, and they're extremely inexpensive. Then we're going to go ahead and sell this off so that we can pick up another project and keep it going. If this sort of thing sounds like it appeals to you, make sure you stick around, but also consider subscribing and let me know in the comments below that you're interested in this. If this video does well, I'm really hoping to do a whole lot more of these. So anyway, let's get down to the workbench and get started. All right, now we're on the bench, so we get to start doing the fun stuff. And the first thing I'm going to want to do is basically give this thing a mini setup before I take the strings off. And the reason I want to do that is just so that we can get the neck as close to straight as we need it to be and just get an overall feel for where we're at in terms of the fret quality and so forth. So from playing this, I can tell that the action's too high and it's not consistent up and down the neck, and so I'm expecting that there's going to be way too much neck relief. So to check the neck relief, we're going to put capo here. We're going to hold right at the body joint, and we're going to look in the middle. And this has got a massive amount of relief. Like, I don't even need to get the feeler gauges out. I think I could fit a coin under it. So we definitely need to tighten the truss rod, and I want to see what the action is too, but we have so much neck relief that the action is going to end up coming down just from setting that. Now we may have too much relief because these strings are pretty big. So on the bass side, I like to have about 4/64ths, and holy crap, we're at about 7/64ths, and here, yeah, almost 7/64ths. So way too much action. I think what we're going to do now is do the truss rod. One thing I really like about these Ibanez is that we have this really nifty cover on the truss rod, so we don't have to take the cover off. We can just do that. So we want to tighten the truss rod because we want it to be able to counteract the string tension. Usually I would only go a little bit at a time, but this one needs a ton. Okay, now we're about where I feel like it should be. It's still high, but I don't want to keep cranking on the truss rod because when I put lighter strings on it, it's going to have less relief anyway. So I think that's going to get us right in the ballpark, which is all I really need for right now. At least it's straightish. Now we can go back and see where our action is at and start setting that. We're already now at about 4/64ths, 4.5/64ths on the bass. So that neck relief was so bad, that was really the primary source of where my action height was coming from. So now I think that means that we can start disassembly, because I at least have confidence that this guy is going to be pretty good. Well, I'll be damned. This is a DiMarzio pickup too. I thought this was the stock Ibanez pickup. This is also a DiMarzio. I don't know from the part number which one it is, but come on, focus. That's cool. Alright, so at some point I reached my maximum recording time on that camera. Anyway, getting back to this, I got the bridge off, and one thing that I'm seeing, or not seeing, is any bare metal on the bottom of this bridge. And that's kind of a problem, because you need this to ground on the bridge to keep things quiet. So when we put this back together, we're going to make sure that that's a little bit better. So now what I want to do is start cleaning this thing, and what we're going to use is good old Ronsonol naphtha. And this stuff is good for just about any surface, so you don't have to worry about it causing problems. Hopefully it'll be strong enough to get all the schmutz off of the fretboard. Alright, so already this fretboard's looking way better. I've still got some work to do to it. It's not as clean as I want it, but it's definitely clean enough until we get the fretwork done. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the body. I mean, just nasty. Nobody wants that on their guitar, especially if it's not theirs. Tell you what, the guitar even feels better after you do this. It just feels so much better. So that's great. We've got it nice and clean. So now that the fretboard is all cleaned, the next thing that I want to do before I tape up the fretboard is to clean up the fret ends. And I do this before I tape the board because I like to be able to get right into that corner. And if I've got tape here, then that thickness of the tape prevents me from getting right down to the wood, and sometimes you can still feel the result. And what I'm going to do here is just a quick little round over on each of these fret ends. And I'm also going to check, some of these are a little bit proud from some sprout, so we want to be able to take care of that as well. So I'm just going to go up the fretboard and get all of these, and then we'll tape up the fretboard and we'll address the frets some more. Now, being able to really pay attention to these frets up here at the top is why I like to have the neck off of the guitar body whenever possible. It just makes this section so much easier to do. And for the sake of 4 screws, in most cases it's the way to go, especially in a situation like this where I also want it to be able to clean everything really well. Having these things apart just makes a big difference. Now, one other thing I like to do while I'm here too is to knock off the corner of this nut. If your hand is running up and down this fretboard and you run into the nut, having this part nicely rounded really makes a big difference in how things feel. Alright, so now we've got our sandpaper out. You can see I've got it spread all over the bench. And what I'm going to do is start with 400 grit. These frets are already in pretty nice shape. They didn't feel real gritty when I was doing bends. There's no signs of wear. So I'm going to be able to start with the 400, and even the 400, I'm just going to do the edges where I was filing. I'm not going to go over the middle of the frets until I go to a finer grit. So we'll start with the 400 and just go over those edges. This is going to get rid of all those tooling marks that I may have from the fret file, and it's going to leave it nice and smooth, and it's also going to round those edges over a little bit more, especially on the top, and that's why I don't go all the way up when I use the fret tool, because I know I'm going to come back with the sandpaper, and I would rather let the sandpaper round those over in a nice, more organic way. So that's my 400. Now we're going to move to 800. We're going to repeat. And then with the 800 and up, we'll also do the frets themselves. And by the time we get to the real fine papers, there won't be any scratches, and they'll actually be polished before I even get the polishing compound out. So now we're going to go over the frets themselves, get all that oxidation off of them. And now what I'm going to do is go this way. That way all of my final scratches will be in this direction. That way my bends will still be nice and smooth, even if some of these scratches may not get polished out in subsequent steps. This is with the 800 grit. Now I'm going to do the exact same process with 1000, 1500, 2000, and then I'm going to move to the micro mesh papers and keep doing it. And this is really pretty time intensive, but this is what gives your frets that absolutely butter smooth feel when you do bends and vibrato. And there's just no replacement for this. All right, so we worked our way through the grits of sandpaper, and I've gotten most of the way through the micro mesh. I'm down to a number 2 micro mesh, and then I'll do the number 1. But you can already see those frets are already looking fantastic. And now we're just going to finish with these last couple of grits. Then I'll get the polishing compound out, and we'll polish them. All right, now we got the Dremel wheel out. We're going to take our polishing compound. We're going to spread it along here liberally. Now we're just going to go through with this guy. All right, now we'll clean these off a little bit. And just look at them. I mean, they're fantastic. The ends are super smooth, well-rounded. This thing's going to play like $1,000,000. All right, now that that's all off, we'll give the board another wipe down with the naphtha. This will give the board one final cleaning, plus it'll get all the residue from the fretwork off of it. What I want to do is get the neck treated so that it can be chilling out while I do the rest of the work. And to start, I'm going to use the same lemon oil that everyone uses, but my big complaint with lemon oil is that it just doesn't last. It looks nice for a day or two, and then it fades back to the dull looking finish you have to start with. So what I do is, after I put a liberal amount of the lemon oil on, I actually seal it in with a waxy product. Specifically, I use Howard's Feed and Wax. And that product does a couple things. For one, it's going to lock this in, so you're going to have more like this sort of an appearance. If you look here, you can see it's quite a bit darker. It's also very shiny because it's wet. So the Howard's is going to keep that darker look, but without that high gloss that you would get from a wet fingerboard. The other thing it does is, because it's actually a real wax finish, is that it keeps it looking this way for an incredibly long time. So now we've got this oiled up real well, and now before we even wipe it off, we're going to put the Howard's on. And this is what the Howard's looks like. Most hardware stores have it. And now that we've got the goop on the board, we're just going to go ahead and spread it around. We'll work it in. And then, just like when you wax your car, you let it sit there until it dries, and then you polish it off. All right, so now what I'm going to do is use a little bit of this swirl remover, and I'm going to use the swirl remover to try to give a nice even sheen across all of this. Right now, where it was played is worn a little bit smoother, therefore a little bit shinier than the rest of it. Now, one thing I would recommend is that if this is not something that you're real experienced with, don't use power tools. If you're not careful, you can destroy the finish. You can get it too hot. You can also cause a situation where you just go right through it, and none of those is a good situation. You can do it by hand. It just takes a whole lot longer. But unless you're experienced doing it this way, that's the method I would recommend. All right, so now we've got this done, and you can see it's got sort of a semi-gloss or a matte finish pretty much all over it now. It's still not completely even, but it's a lot closer than it was, and now I think it really looks good. And if I can get the light right, you can see that that top starts to dance a little bit. and it really starts to show off the chatoyance of that veneer. So I'm happy with how that came out. It's a nice even look now. It feels good. So now what we're going to do is turn our attention to the back, and on the back what we're going to do is just start to deal with some of these wear spots. Alright, so now we're back, and you can see that I kind of managed to accomplish a few things while I was off camera. I wiped the polish off of this fretboard, which is looking great, and the headstock is nice and clean, shiny. Tuners are reinstalled, and obviously we have the neck back on the body. Moving down here, I've got the pickups installed. Right now I still have the protective coating over them, so that's why they're a little goofy looking. We got this guy all nice and cleaned up and reinstalled, and now what I want to do is reinstall the electronics. So I'll cut away to some of the pictures, but what I did was to build this template from this, and I mounted the components to this so that I could clean up the wiring. Now I've got the wiring on the switch cleaned up and is back to the original configuration based on this diagram that I found. And I've gotten the wiring as far as I can without the pickups. All the rest of the wiring is for the pickups and then the output jack. That's all going to happen in the guitar. And so that's going to be my next step, is to put this into the guitar and get those pickups all soldered in. One more thing I wanted to point out, you saw that I did a little bit of the touch up on some of those spots. Now that I've done the rest and it's had a chance to dry, you don't see any of those spots at all. The guitar body is looking really nice. So let's get the electronics in, and then we'll be in the home stretch. So now the wiring is complete, and I'll show a close-up of the wiring. It's a whole lot cleaner looking than it was. Plus, now we have the functionality that we expect. Now we can finish putting the guitar together and just make sure that we're in good shape on the setup. So that's what we're going to do next. Alright, so here we are. Now we have strings on it, and we're all tuned to pitch. The strings are all stretched. And now what we need to do is just go through the final setup. And I'm going to start this process by checking my action. So if you remember, we had the action set before we took the old strings off, so we should be right in the ballpark. So I'm going to check on the low side, and I'm right at about 4/64 or a hair under. And we're at about 3/64 up on the high E. So our action's a little bit lower than with the other strings. And this makes sense because this is a smaller gauge of string, so we don't have as much pull on the neck. I'll be checking the neck relief in a minute, but I assume that's going to be a little bit straighter. So right now this action is really low. What we want to do is just make sure we don't have any issues with a high fret from any sort of fret buzz. And I'll go through the whole thing, but I'm not hearing or feeling anything. So even with this nice low action, our frets are nice and level, and we've got a really good playability already. What I think I'm going to do is just raise this action ever so slightly, just so that it's a little bit easier to bend, and if someone that buys this has a heavy hand, they won't be getting the fret buzz. Okay, so I came up about a half a turn on each one of these saddle screws. The action's still pretty low. It's well below 4/64 on the high E. So I'm really happy with that. Now what I want to do is check and see where we're at with our neck relief. Like I mentioned, I expect it to be a little bit less than we had with that heavier set of strings. So just like before, we've got the capo on the first. We're going to fret it right at the neck joint, and we're going to check somewhere around the 7th or 8th fret. And if you can hear that, you can't see it, can you? There's just a little bit of relief, right around 10 thousandths of relief, which is right where I like it to be, which explains why it feels so nice to play. So that's good. So that means I don't need to do any tweaks to the truss rod. It's right where I want it. Now what we can do is check the intonation. So now we lightly fret at the 12th. We're very sharp on the E, so we're going to need to move that E saddle closer to the bridge. On the A, we've got to adjust the bottom 3, and the top 3 we're looking good. So I'm going to do those off camera, and then we'll keep going. So the last thing I want to do to this is just now clean up the nut. In order to clean up the nut, what I want to do is lower the nut slots just a little bit when I fret behind the 2nd fret, and then see how much clearance we have. I feel like that's a little bit too high, and it's the same on all the strings. Plus, by cleaning up these slots, it'll really help with tuning stability, and it'll really just make it play even better. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we'll do this one string at a time, starting with the low E. I use these Music Nomad files. I feel like they're kind of foolproof. We're going to take a few slices, and then we're going to start to taper it down. That way it's only the leading edge of the nut on the fretboard side that the string is really resting on. Tune that back to pitch. Now we'll check our height again. A little bit more to go. So we're just going to try to sneak up on it, because once you go too far, you can't really put it back. So we want to make sure we only do a little bit at a time. Alright, really happy with that. Now I get to do that 5 more times. So we just put a little bit of a dab of oil on there, and what that'll do is just help ensure that these stay nice and lubricated and our tuning stays consistent. Alright, so the last thing that I want to do now is just take a look at the pickup height. And this is really a very subjective sort of a thing. I usually like to have the neck pickup somewhere around 1/8 of an inch from the strings as a starting point. But I've already played this a little bit, and I'm really happy with how it sounds so far. So I don't want to change it too much. But we're going to check this guy. Fret at the end. So yeah, we're right near 1/8 of an inch. I think that's pretty good. Alright, so there it is. One fully functional, totally completed guitar. Minus one last step. The last thing, which is always the most fun, is to peel those new plastics off. Now we have one absolutely complete, totally done guitar. And I'm very happy with how this guy came out. It looks great. It plays great. Those frets feel good. It's got a great setup. And even on this little practice amp on my workbench, I'm really happy with how this sounds. I can't wait to get it upstairs, play it through the other amp, and do some comparison. So let's go do that, and then I'll have some final thoughts. So I want to give you a quick before and after just to show you how this sounds. Now, I'm not a good guitarist. I'm much better at working on them than playing them. So set your expectations low. But I'm going to take you through a couple of different sets of tones, starting with cleans. One thing I'll point out right away is that we have a bridge position. We don't have a number 2 position. We have a middle position, no number 3, and we do have a neck. And I think that's primarily due to whoever replaced it with this Invader just didn't know how to wire the 5-way switching. So we'll start on the bridge, and we'll just go through some cleans. Now when we go to the neck, it just turns to complete mud because this is such a hot pickup. So it's really just unusable for cleans. Now if we go to something quite a bit higher gain, this is where I think the bridge pickup really starts to sound pretty decent. I like that. But neck. This is too dark. All right, that's it for the before. All right, guys, let's go through some of our different tones now that we've got the guitar all done. We're gonna start with our cleans, and we're gonna be on that bridge pickup, which is supposed to be a lot like a JB pickup. Okay, now if we go into our second position, now we get the inner coil from each humbucker. So let's see how this one sounds. A lot lower output, but it's got almost like an acoustic sort of a sound. Now if we go to the two humbuckers in a normal mode, now we go to our 4 position. This is the neck humbucker, but in a parallel configuration instead of a normal series configuration. Nice and bright for a neck humbucker. And now the normal humbucker position for the neck. Really a sweet sounding neck humbucker, very much in that PAF territory. Let's try some real high gain stuff. This is really where this bridge pickup is going to shine. Really like how that sounds. Now we go to the number 2 spot. Middle. Number 4. And our neck. All very usable, but for sure, the Rockstar with this much gain is definitely that high output bridge pickup. Well guys, I had 3 goals when we started this. I wanted the guitar to look nice and clean and look better, and I definitely think we've accomplished that. I wanted the guitar to sound better and be more versatile, and I think I've just shown that we definitely did that too. But the most important part is that we made this an incredibly good playing guitar. The fretwork feels amazing, the overall action feels great, and the overall playability is just leagues better than it was. Even when I was playing this to do my demo, I'm still not any good, but it was so much easier to do it this time than it was for the one before. It's just a pleasure to play now. It feels great. The tuning stability is great. I love how it sounds and it looks great. The only thing I have left to do now is put it up for sale and move it along to the next owner. And whoever gets it, I think is going to be really happy with it. Well, anyway, guys, this is going to do it for me. I know this is a big departure from my normal RC-based videos. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And if you're coming to the channel for the first time, make sure you like and subscribe, because it really is my goal to do more guitar-related videos just like this one. All right, guys, thanks.